The beeping of hospital machines was the only sound in the room. That steady, mechanical sound should have been comforting. It meant the machines were still keeping my son alive, but to me, it was like a countdown, each beep reminding me that time was passing and I still didn't know if Ethan would make it. My little boy, just 7 years old, lay pale and still on the white hospital bed. His eyelashes rested against his cheeks, his skin almost the same color as the sheets. His small chest rose and fell under the weight of tubes and wires. The doctors said the accident was bad, really bad. Head trauma, internal injuries, possible long-term damage. They used clinical terms I barely understood, but the meaning was clear. He was fighting for his life, and the outcome was uncertain. I sat frozen in the hard plastic chair beside him. My fingers curled around his tiny hand. I whispered to him over and over, "Mommy's here, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. Just wake up." When I first heard about the accident, my instincts had screamed to call my husband, Mark. I thought he would drop everything and rush to the hospital, his own panic matching mine. After all, this was our son. But when I called, his voice was slow and slurred, the kind of voice I knew too well. "He'd been drinking." "Mark, you need to come to the hospital right now," I said, my voice breaking. "Ethan's been in an accident. It's serious." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a muttered, I can't. Not now." I thought maybe he was in shock, that he needed a moment to process. But hours passed, and he didn't show up. That first night, while I sat by Ethan's bed watching the monitors, Mark stayed away. I tried to convince myself he was just overwhelmed. But the truth settled in fast, he wasn't coming. Not physically, he was still in town, but into a bottle. Every time I called, he sounded drunk. Every time I begged him to come, he had an excuse. It felt like I was losing both my son and my husband at the same time. The accident itself replayed in my head like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. We'd been driving home from the grocery store, Ethan chatting in the back seat about his favorite superhero movie. I remember the light turning green, my foot pressing gently on the gas, and then a blur of motion to my left. A car, speeding through a red light, slammed into us with a force that knocked the air from my lungs. The sound of crushing metal still echoes in my mind. When I came to, my airbag had deployed, my seatbelt had left a deep bruise across my chest, but I was conscious. I turned toward the back seat, and that's when I saw Ethan, slumped in his booster seat, not moving. I screamed his name, tried to reach him, but my seatbelt jammed. People rushed to the car. Someone called an ambulance. The rest is a blur, the paramedics pulling him out, the sirens wailing as we sped to the hospital, the doctors swarming as soon as we arrived. Now, here I was, staring at my little boy's motionless body. His hair was messy from the crash, a small cut on his forehead stitched up neatly, but it was the stillness that broke me. Ethan had always been full of life, always moving, always talking. Seeing him so still felt wrong. I barely left his side. The nurses encouraged me to rest, but I couldn't. I sat through every test, every examination, my mind swinging between hope and dread. Every time a doctor entered the room, my heart jumped into my throat. In those long hours, I thought a lot about Mark. About the man I had married, the man who had once held Ethan in his arms with tears in his eyes the day he was born. Where had that man gone? Somewhere along the years, the weight of bills, work stress, and his own unresolved demons had pushed him toward the bottle. But this was our son's life. How could he not be here? On the third day, a nurse asked me gently if there was anyone else I wanted to call for support. I shook my head. My parents were gone, my siblings lived states away, and my so-called partner had abandoned me emotionally. It was just me and Ethan now. Late that night, as I sat in the dim light of the hospital room, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "I can't handle this." That was it. "No, how is he?" "No, I'm on my way." Just those words. My throat tightened. I stared at the message, the weight of it pressing down on my chest. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to scream. Instead, I set it face down on the table and turned back to Ethan. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and whispered, "It's okay, baby. We don't need anyone else. Mommy's here. I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, I made a silent promise to him and to myself. No matter how hard this got, I would fight for him with everything I had. Even if I had to do it completely alone. The days in the hospital blended together, like one long, endless stretch of fluorescent lights and quiet desperation. There was no morning, no night, just the rhythm of nurses' footsteps, the hum of medical machines, and the sound of my own voice reading to Ethan. Every morning, I'd start with his favorite bedtime story, the one about the little fox who gets lost in the forest and finds his way home. I read it even though Ethan's eyes stayed closed, even though he didn't move. The doctors said coma patients could sometimes hear, and I clung to that hope. Maybe, somewhere in that quiet space, where his mind was hiding, my voice could guide him back. I'd hold his hand as I read, my thumb rubbing circles into his skin. His fingers were limp, but I told myself that one day they'd curl around mine again. Nurses came in and out, checking his vitals, adjusting machines, whispering updates I didn't always want to hear. After a while, I stopped asking for every detail. The numbers, the medical jargon, it all became noise. The only thing I cared about was seeing his eyes open. Mark still hadn't visited. Not once. At first, I made excuses for him. Maybe he was too scared. Maybe he thought if he didn't see Ethan like this, he could pretend it wasn't real. But as the days passed, those excuses fell apart. The truth was simpler and uglier. He just wasn't willing to be here. One afternoon, while I was stretching my legs in the hallway, I ran into Mrs. Collins, our neighbor from 2 houses down. She gave me a tight-lipped smile, the kind people give when they're afraid their sympathy might spill over into pity. I've seen Mark around, she said gently. Mostly at O'Malley's bar. Almost every night. The words hit me like a punch. I nodded, pretending I already knew, pretending it didn't hurt. But when I walked back into Ethan's room and saw my little boy lying there, fighting for his life, my chest ached with something deeper than anger. I was numb, too exhausted to rage, too hollow to cry. That night, I found myself in the hospital's family lounge. The vending machines hummed in the corner, their bright lights almost mocking in a place so heavy with grief. I poured myself a cup of stale coffee from the communal pot, the bitter smell filling my nose. The couch I sat on was worn, the cushions sinking under my weight. I felt like I might sink too, into the silence, into the exhaustion. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up, hoping for once it would say, "I'm on my way," or "How's Ethan?" Instead, it read "Oh, I can't handle this." That was it. No questions about our son. No sign of love or support. Just his own pain, tossed at me like a stone. I stared at the screen for a long time. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to let fall. My mind replayed every moment of our life together, the early years when we were happy, the day Ethan was born, the way Mark had held him with awe in his eyes. Where had that man gone? I typed and deleted 3 different replies. First anger. You're his father. You don't get to check out. Then pleading, please, Mark. He needs you. Then nothing at all. I finally locked the phone and set it on the table beside me. It was in that quiet moment, with the hum of the vending machines and the bitter taste of coffee in my mouth, that the truth sank in. I was completely alone in this fight. It's a strange kind of loneliness, the kind where the person you should be able to lean on is still alive, still reachable, but completely absent in every way that matters. It's heavier than silence, it's a betrayal that sits on your chest and steals your breath. When I went back to Ethan's room that night, I sat beside him and took his hand again. His skin was warm, his heartbeat steady on the monitor. I whispered to him, my voice breaking, "It's just you and me, kiddo. But that's okay. We'll get through this. I promise." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched the slow rise and fall of his chest, counting each breath as if my watching could somehow keep him alive. I realized something else in those hours. I had to be strong enough for both of us. If I fell apart, there was no one to catch me. No one to take my place. Mark had already abandoned the fight, so it was my battle alone. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of determination lit. I didn't know how I was going to get through this, but I knew one thing with certainty. I wasn't going to give up. Not on Ethan. Not ever. By the 10th day in the hospital, my body felt like it had become part of the chair I sat in. My back ached from leaning forward over Ethan's bed, my legs were heavy from barely moving, and my mind was in a fog. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed too bright, and every beep from the machines was a reminder of where I was and why. I hadn't slept properly in days. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of the accident, of the screech of tires, the sickening impact, and the moment I turned and saw my little boy slumped in his seat. Those images clung to me like shadows, and no amount of coffee or deep breathing could shake them. That morning, my vision was blurry from exhaustion. I was sitting at the small table in the corner of Ethan's room, trying to eat a piece of toast that tasted like cardboard, when a nurse walked in holding a plain white envelope. "This was dropped off at the front desk for you," she said with a small smile. I frowned. My name was written across the front in neat, almost formal handwriting. There was no return address, no hospital label, just my name, Anna. Who brought it? I asked. "I'm not sure," the nurse replied. "The volunteer at reception said someone handed it over and left right away." Curiosity cut through the fog of exhaustion. My fingers felt clumsy as I slid them under the flap and opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it slowly, my eyes scanning the words Dear Anna, I don't know if you remember me, but years ago, you showed me kindness when no one else did. I heard about your son. I want to help. No conditions. No strings attached. Enclosed is something I hope will ease at least one of your burdens. A friend. I read it twice, then a third time, trying to place the handwriting, the tone, the story behind it. My mind was sluggish, but something tugged at the edge of my memory. I turned the paper over, and something else slipped out, a second sheet. At first, I thought it might be another note, but when I unfolded it, my breath caught in my throat. It was a check. A check for $10,000. I sat frozen, staring at it. My hands began to tremble, the paper quivering between my fingers. $10,000, that was more than I'd made in 3 months at my old job. It was more than enough to cover the hospital bills that were already piling up, the ones I had been pretending not to think about. But beyond the number, beyond the money, it was the fact that someone I apparently knew, had cared enough to help without even asking for anything in return. My mind drifted back years earlier, to a rainy afternoon at the local grocery store. I had been waiting in line when I noticed the young woman in front of me, holding a crying baby. She was trying to pay for a small pile of groceries, baby formula, diapers, bread, but her hands shook as she counted out crumpled bills and coins. When the cashier told her she was short by $12, her face went pale. She started putting back the formula, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I'll just take the bread." I had stepped forward without thinking. "It's okay, I'll cover it," I told her, handing the cashier a 20. She had looked at me with wide, tearful eyes, stammering, "Thank you. You have no idea." I hadn't thought about that day in years. Could this letter be from her? Had she somehow heard about Ethan? I searched the note for clues, for some hidden detail that would confirm it. But there was nothing, no address, no last name, no phone number. Just a friend. I leaned back in the chair, the envelope and check resting in my lap. My mind felt lighter for the first time in days. This letter wasn't just money, it was something much bigger. It was proof that the kindness we give away freely has a way of coming back to us, sometimes when we need it most. I thought about how I had been feeling these last 10 days, isolated, abandoned, worn down to nothing. I had been telling myself I was alone in this fight. But now, I realized that somewhere out there, someone cared enough to reach into my darkness and hand me a lifeline. I folded the note carefully, tucking it back into the envelope along with the check. My heart felt a little steadier, my breathing a little calmer. I reached for Ethan's hand and whispered, "See, baby? There are still good people in this world. We're not alone." For the first time since the accident, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel in days, hope. The letter and the check had arrived like a beam of sunlight cutting through a week of endless storms. I didn't waste time deciding what to do. That very day, I spoke to the hospital's billing department and put a portion of the money toward the growing mountain of medical bills. Watching the balance drop felt like breathing for the first time in days, one weight lifted off my chest. With the rest, I arranged for Ethan to be moved into a private room. It was quiet there, away from the constant beeping and footsteps of the main ward. The room had a pull-out couch, which meant I no longer had to spend nights curled in a hard chair or trying to sleep sitting up. Now, I could lie close to him, hear his breathing, and be there the moment he needed me. The private room also meant more attentive care. The nurses checked on him more often, and I could speak directly to the doctors without feeling like I was just another name on a long list of patients. They were able to try new treatments, small changes in medication, additional therapies to stimulate his brain activity. Every new plan gave me something to hold on to, something to hope for. Every night, when the lights dimmed and the hallway grew quiet, I would take out the envelope, unfold the letter, and read it again. I had memorized every word, but somehow, seeing it in writing calmed me. It reminded me that somewhere out there, someone cared enough to step in without being asked, without expecting anything in return. One evening, as I sat reading it again, my phone rang. I saw Mark's name flash across the screen. For a moment, I hesitated. I hadn't heard from him in over a week. When I answered, the slur in his voice was unmistakable. "Do you?" He paused, and I heard the clink of glass. "Do you still need me?" It was such a strange, hollow question. Do you still need me? As though fatherhood was optional, something you clocked in and out of depending on the weather. I looked over at Ethan, his small face relaxed in sleep, machines still helping him fight. That was the moment I knew, without any doubt, whether Ethan recovered or not, my marriage was over. Love couldn't survive in the shadows of neglect and addiction. It needed light, presence, effort. Mark had already left in every way that mattered. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I simply said, Ethan is still fighting, and hung up. The days kept passing, each one a slow march of routine, reading to Ethan, talking to doctors, holding his hand, praying silently. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at his face, trying to memorize it, afraid that if I blinked too long, something might change. And then, 3 weeks after the accident, it happened. It was late afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting warm stripes across the bed. I was sitting beside him, reading a chapter from the Fox story again, my free hand wrapped around his asterisk. At first, I thought I imagined it, a tiny twitch against my palm. My breath caught. I looked down, holding perfectly still. Then it happened. Again. His fingers moved. Ethan? My voice was a whisper and a plea all at once. Baby, can you hear me? Slowly, painfully, his eyelids fluttered open. The light made him squint, his gaze unfocused. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. His lips parted, and the faintest sound came out. Mom? That one word broke me. Tears flooded my eyes until I could barely see him. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead gently to his, sobbing and laughing at the same time. Yes, sweetheart. I'm right here. I've been here the whole time. His hand squeezed mine weakly, but it was enough. It was everything. The nurses rushed in when they heard me calling for help, their faces lighting up when they saw his eyes open. The doctor arrived minutes later, examining him quickly and telling me this was a good sign, an incredible sign. Recovery would be slow, but this was the first real step back to us. That night, for the first time in nearly a month, I slept without fear gnawing at my chest. The machine still beeped, the tubes were still there, but now I had proof. My boy was still here. And I silently promised that no matter how long it took, I would walk every step of his recovery with him. Ethan's recovery was slow, almost painfully so. There were days when progress felt like a whisper, barely there, and others when I saw glimpses of the little boy I remembered, the one who used to race through the living room with a blanket tied around his shoulders, pretending to be a superhero. At first, he couldn't walk without help. Physical therapy became our new routine. Twice a day, a kind but firm therapist would guide him through exercises, lifting his legs, moving his arms, reteaching his muscles how to do things they had once done without thought. Some days, Ethan's frustration would boil over into tears. Why can't I just run, Mom? He'd cry, his little voice trembling. I would kneel in front of him, wipe his cheeks, and say, because every hero has to train before they can fly again. And you're my hero. Each time he took a step without my hand holding him, it felt like the world stopped to celebrate with me. Even the smallest milestones, lifting a spoon, drawing a shaky picture, became victories worth cheering for. While Ethan fought for his strength, I quietly made a decision I had been avoiding. I filed for divorce. There was no big confrontation, no shouting match, no tears on his part. Mark didn't fight it, he didn't even ask for an explanation. He was too deep in his own world, drowning himself in alcohol, and I no longer had the strength to pull him out. For once, I didn't feel guilty about letting go. My focus was where it needed to be, on my son, and on the people who truly mattered. Months passed, and Ethan grew stronger. One afternoon, I watched him take his first unassisted steps across the living room. The way he grinned at me, his face glowing with pride, made every sleepless night, every tear, every prayer worth it. By spring, he was strong enough to play outside again. I remember that first day vividly. The sun was warm, the grass smelled fresh, and the air felt lighter somehow. He ran, a little wobbly at first, chasing a red ball across the yard. His laughter floated through the air like music I hadn't heard in too long. That night, after putting him to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and paper. I had thought about this moment for months, writing back to the mysterious friend who had sent the letter and the check. I thanked them for their generosity, for stepping into my life when I was at my weakest. I told them how their gift had done more than pay bills, it had given me the space to be fully present for Ethan. I shared the news of his recovery, how he was walking again, smiling again, living again. I didn't know if they would ever write back, but I needed them to know the depth of my gratitude. A few weeks later, an envelope arrived. My hands shook as I opened it, recognizing the same neat handwriting from the first letter. Dear Anna, I don't need thanks. Just promise me you'll keep being the kind of person who helps others without expecting anything in return. That's how the world changes, one act at a time. I read it over and over, my eyes stinging. This wasn't about debt or repayment, it was about passing the kindness forward. About making sure the chain didn't end with me. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it away in my nightstand drawer, knowing I would keep it forever. It wasn't just paper, it was a reminder of what had carried me through one of the darkest chapters of my life. That same afternoon, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching Ethan in the yard. The sunlight caught his hair, turning it golden. He was laughing, running after that same red ball, his legs now steady and sure. In that moment, the memory of hospital machines and sleepless nights felt like a distant echo. I realized something then: life has a way of breaking you, shattering everything you thought was unshakable. But it also has a way of surprising you, of sending light through the cracks when you least expect it. Sometimes, the help you need doesn't come from the person you thought you could depend on. Sometimes, it comes from a stranger, or maybe not a stranger at all, but a friend you didn't realize you still had. And sometimes, when you're at your absolute lowest, when you feel like the world has turned its back on you, a single letter can change everything. As I watched Ethan play, his laughter mixing with the sound of the breeze, I knew one thing for certain: someday, I would be the one to write a letter like that for someone else. Because kindness, once given, should never stop moving.